Good evening, everyone. You're listening to Red Pill 78. I am the Corruption Detector, and this is your Red Pill News. Hope everyone out there is having a wonderful evening. We've got much to discuss tonight. Lots of news from today, lots of breaking bits of information that have happened over the course of the last week. Our returning guest tonight is going to be Jeffrey Peterson, the former social network pioneer and current whistleblower on the Arizona Mafia. We're going to be talking about some of the anti-corruption efforts that are taking place in Mexico and how that might tie into the presidency of our one and only President Donald J. Trump. First of all, we're going to be giving a couple of quick hellos to people in the audience. I know I've got people here from Michigan. We've got people from Canada. We've got lots of people speculating on that terrible event in El Paso. So that is going to be one of the first things we talk about today. I see patriots from, Florida, from Riverside, California. We've got Columbus, Ohio, Oklahoma, St. Petersburg, Florida, Oregon. Where we go one, we go all. That's right. Pittsburgh, North Carolina. Terry, good to see you. Georgetown, California. Nashville, Tennessee. Virginia, Idaho, Philadelphia, Northern California. Alaska, Georgia, Florida. Texas, California, Colorado, Midwest, Deplorable, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Texas, and so many more, guys. I am going to go ahead and just throw on a real quick lag on the chat. And we're going to get this shared out to Twitter. And if I could just ask that everyone here also do the same. And please share this on your favorite social networking sites so that we can get a little bit more visibility, because we certainly are not going to be getting any help from YouTube. All right, so this is going out right now to Twitter. Thank you very much for your assistance, guys, and thanks for tuning in tonight. Without further ado, we are now going to talk with the one, the only, Jeff Peterson. Jeff, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm good, and how are you?
I'm doing really well, yeah, so lots of breaking information over the course of the last week, and even more today. Yeah, I don't know where to start. Let's start off with what happened in El Paso. So, I mean, that you're a Texas person yourself. And you were telling me some very interesting information before the show started. So for anyone who doesn't know, if you were living under a rock today, there was a mass casualty event that took place at a Walmart. Also says that it took place at a mall, which is located very, very close to that. You know, I saw some strange things. I definitely saw some people that looked like they were victims of, you know, someone with a projectile weapon, shall we say. There were definitely some casualties, but there was also some footage which seemed to look like it was from some type of training exercise. I saw people wearing Sam's Club vests, and I know that Sam's Club and Walmart are owned by the same people, but technically they're not supposed to wear the Sam's Club attire when they're working at Walmart. I don't know. Also, they keep talking now about the Walmart, whereas previously, earlier in the day, they were talking about the mall. The issue was the mall. So there's lots of confusion, you know, and until they recently identified the individual who is supposedly the person behind the whole thing, who I have on the screen here, they had identified a couple of other people, and I heard reports of even more than just one person there. So, Jeff, what did you hear about this today?
Yeah, well, I will not have my usual smiley face here for a moment, because it's any way you look at it, it's a horrific incident.
Yeah.
It was in, as we all know, it was in El Paso. Something I want to point out, though, right away, that not just I noticed, but a whole bunch of accounts on social media noticed, there was some kind of not normal social media presence that took a hold immediately when this incident was reported. Meaning people who were tweeting about it on Twitter saw accounts they had not seen before that stepped in and started sending messages. Many of the accounts that were sending messages did not even have pictures of human profiles behind them. I had a few threads I'd started about it that I'd labeled as speculative threads. I've said this is developing information. We don't know for sure what's happened. I was immediately attacked, at first by tens of accounts, then by hundreds of accounts.
Wow.
I ended up deleting the messages so as to not trigger Twitter's auto ban. But yeah, something strange, aside from the horrific incident itself, something strange was in the air on social media in terms of today's incident.
Yeah, it was very weird. There was also a lot of takedowns I saw. Saw several accounts that were trying to put out information about it. And, you know, as for instance, Brendan Dilley, I know he's right down by there as well. He was listening on a police scanner. He was reporting on the stuff that he was hearing, and they just took him down. You know, I mean, I certainly didn't see anything in the content that he was broadcasting that would warrant such a takedown. But, you know, of course, what reason do they need in today's world?
Yeah, well, as a former social media founder myself, I can tell you that many of the takedowns are triggered over the short term automatically, as many people know, with automatic filters, and then they're sent up to teams that evaluate them within 5 or 10 or 15 minutes. Usually, Twitter has those teams. I've been at Twitter. I was there a couple of years ago on a high performance database initiative, among other things. And what happens is there's these groups of people. You're probably familiar with this, that go around having accounts shut down. And so when an incident like this happens, it presents a unique opportunity for those sort of online gangs to report a bunch of the accounts they'd like to see shut down anyways. It gives them opportunity to do that. I think Dilley, who's someone I know pretty well, is one of the accounts that was subjected to that today. I don't know what you saw.
Yeah, no, that specifically that, you know, there was a couple other people that I, you know, just in passing, I was handed off information. People sent me messages, and several of the tweets with bits of info. I went to go look, and the entire account was gone. Now, the woman that I saw interviewed, she was kind of, you know, just, it was right in front of Walmart. It was right after it happened. She was speaking in Spanish. Somebody else was interpreting. But, you know, what little Spanish I know, I could hear her saying that there were, you know, 3 to 4 men in black. She did not see one, you know, young white man. She saw 3 to 4 men in black coming through. You know, so did you happen to see her as well?
I did. And due to my background as the founder of the first large social media company in the United States for bilingual Hispanics, my old company, Que Pasa, as some of your viewers probably know. I ran that, and as part of that, I spoke Spanish and do speak Spanish, spoken it for many years. I saw that video, and I found the witness to be very credible. Some of the people had posted, well, she seems very calm to be talking about having just seen a shooting incident, and I agree with that. The witness did seem very calm. However, we need to remember, as an immigrant from Mexico, many of them, unfortunately, are more desensitized to violence from shooting events than your typical witness in the United States would be, due to the rampant violence in Mexico, which is a terrible, terrible thing. It was just a fact of life. But yeah, I absolutely saw that witness. I saw other witnesses that talked about 3 and 4 people dressed in black suits with goggles on so that you couldn't see their eyes. Yeah. I saw those witnesses. I found those witnesses to be credible. The video seemed to be being deleted from social media right and left. I don't know why. All I can do is speculate about it. You know as well as I do what that tends to sort of suggest.
Yeah, anytime anytime one of these events happen, you can see all of these different threads starting to emerge. You've got people that haven't been kind of caught up with yet. So you've got people on the scene. They're talking about the actual, you know, firsthand accounts that they see. And then later on, by the time they get their, you know, their time on mainstream media, like this woman, actually, she was on Fox News later in the day, gave a conflicting report to her initial report. And that was a great point, what you made about, you know, the everyday violence that you see in Mexico. You know, and even besides that, I always like to remind people that just because you would see yourself reacting one way to a tragic event doesn't mean that that's actually how you're going to react when you get into that situation. You know, people act differently, you know, for, you know, different ways to trauma than you might actually expect. So I remember the event that took place down in Parkland. There was a girl who had been in school and was actually being escorted out of the building with Nicholas Cruz during the active event still taking place. So, you know, right there, you can see, you know, there were obviously multiple people involved, but people said, you know, oh, she giggled. You know, so they didn't take her seriously, you know. But I mean, you know, people act strange under circumstances like that. You know, I mean, you really never know what you're going to do. Yeah,
no, and not to belittle any event, but just due to the pure shock. Sometimes I've seen in news media, victims walk away from these events and they're giggling. They're laughing, like you said, and it's not because they found it funny. It's because their brain has triggered some sort of shock reflex that perhaps lessens the pain for them temporarily. I don't know. But clearly, what happened today in El Paso was a monumental, tragic event. And clearly, look, those of us who have run big social media networks, I ran a social media network with 40 million users. We know that there's always a government presence online. No one knows exactly how big it is. I have a feeling there's more of this sort of, not just United States government presence online, but internationally, there's more presence from questionable accounts than ever before. Oh, yeah. What was very strange to me, and I'll repeat it, what I started with was in today's event, when it was reported out in the media, almost immediately, social media accounts started getting hit with these sort of aggressive disinformation kind of accounts, hundreds of them. I think many of your viewers right now will probably would have noticed receiving messages they don't usually receive today. That to me, pardon the term, is very creepy, very strange. Who knows where it comes from? But all I can say is let's keep draining that swamp.
Most definitely. Just a couple of quick thank yous to the audience. Herkimer Fuddwaddle said, hello from the Quite Frankly family. Glad to have you here. I know Jeff and I are both big fans of Frank. Thank you for that super chat. 27 Sparkle, thank you as well. Jennifer Small says, thanks, Red Pill, for all you do. Thank you for being here, Jennifer. Billy Patterson. Billy, how are you? Thank you for that super chat. And Chris Hawkins, also thank you for that super chat. Chris said, I'll match you. Isn't this wonderful? Isn't this a wonderful time to be alive? Painful news, and it's all the most wonderful thing to see. Our Father loves us so much. Yeah, you know, it's interesting. When it seems like we're getting ahead, this is the playbook. This is what they like to do. Typically, one of these incidents will take place when they need to cover something up in the news. They need to flip that news cycle. They need to put out some bad news, and they always end up blaming the same type of people. You know, just something I wanted to show you guys here. This is something from Methods, and I'm going to have to bring this over from Discord. Let me see. I want to see if I can just bring this over onto the browser here, guys. So this was from a couple days ago on 4chan. It was from, what it says is a warning from a DHS insider. American society is approaching a tipping point, and the powers that be, the globalists, the Zionists, and the banker overlords that control them both, intend to use false flag mass shootings to nudge it over the top. That tipping point is the balance of leftists that approves of genociding white Trump supporters. Yes, gun control is another purpose behind false flags, but mainly as a means to accomplishing their primary goal of genocide of white people. Now, this is, you know, I'm not saying that this is something that is definitely for sure, but I find it very interesting that, you know, supposedly a DHS insider posts something on the board just a couple of days before something like this takes place. You know, so it's just something that you got to think about, because obviously there's an agenda at play here. They want to peg a certain type of person. And almost as soon as this individual was pictured and shown, you knew exactly what they were trying to do. They were trying to say, oh, he's a Trump supporter. Well, I've also got information here to show that he's a registered Democrat. Let me pull that up. Let me get this here. And there it is. Patrick Cruzius, and it says that he's registered with the Democratic Party. Very, very interesting. You know, this is another one of those things that you tend to see. Somebody that proclaims to be a Trump supporter, proclaims to be a conservative, but then you get into their history and you can see that they've been a Democrat, lifelong Democrat.
That's right. I also saw that reported.
Yeah. Now, okay, well, do you have anything else that you want to add specifically to the information here for us, Jeff?
No, to the El Paso incident, I just say that I ended up actually deleting my post because I didn't want to trigger that automatic Twitter account suspension process that seemed to hit so many of the big accounts today. And it's truly unfortunate when we're out there trying to exchange information with each other. And again, the current social media is so oversensitive to conservative viewpoints that accounts actually end up being silenced. It's the modern day equivalent of book burning, but we all know what that means. We're all experiencing it. Yeah, most definitely. It's a great analogy. Just one more thing I wanted to say, actually. I forgot about this in my Discord thread here, but you'll never guess who was in the area, looks like on June 30th? Yeah, sorry, July 28th. July 28th. And that would be
David Hogg. David Hogg was there. He was just there. Let's grab this Texas toast he posted on July 28th. What does that mean? I don't know, but it's another strange thing, you know. I mean, we all are aware of the strange, you know, kind of coincidences that surround Mr. Hogg and his experience there down in Parkland. So, you know, obviously, guys, keep your eyes open. We were, you know, just told a couple of days before by our favorite Anon on the boards that we might need to be checking out and you know, keeping an eye out for an FF. And, you know, it kind of feels like another one has definitely hit. All right. Well, you know, speaking of the idea of these cabal members covering up things that might be popping up in the mainstream press, you know, you had posted a thread about a week ago, or perhaps just earlier this week, regarding a tip that you got about Mexico and American politicians, some members of the Arizona Mafia, perhaps.
Yeah, actually, this was a monumental thread. You know, it's significant when you get branded as a conspiracy theorist, again, by the mainstream media, which I did. They could call it a conspiracy theory, conservative or not. I'm interested in the truth. I call it research. Yeah. And so I got a tip that I wanted to be very careful with, and I was very careful with, about the Pelosi trip to Italy. Which is really a Pelosi trip to Africa, I guess, but no one's explained why they needed to stop over in Italy and stay in a 5-star resort. I got a tip about it, and I'll tell you what the rumor tip was. The rumor was that Pelosi had lunch with Enrique Peña Nieto, the former president of Mexico, who is currently on the run in Spain after being chased out of Mexico by Mexico's new president on possible corruption charges. That's a whole other topic. Anyways, it is, if that's true, that is really interesting, because Pelosi was seen in a bunch of pictures that are now famous on social media, walking around, I believe, in Mexico with Peña Nieto, with Beto O'Rourke behind her. Yeah. You know the pictures I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, and this is during the time period where Chapo Guzman, who is, everyone knows, he's the most notorious narcotics trafficker in recent history, to stand trial in the Eastern District of New York in Brooklyn. He was just convicted. In his trial, it came out in actual court documents that Chapo had paid a $100 million bribe to Peña Nieto. This is not conspiracy theory. This is quoting court documents. All right. Well, if that's the fact, why is Pelosi meeting the guy for lunch in Venice, Italy, which again is unconfirmed, but we got it on a tip. But here's the part that really makes your head explode. Who else, other than Chapo Guzman's wife, is spotted on the same canal? Now, I don't know if you know Venice. It's a very beautiful city. It's not a big city. It's actually quite small. It's very elegant. It's very beautiful. It's very small. She is spotted on the same canal as Nancy Pelosi, where she's supposedly having lunch with Peña Nieto. There's a picture of it. There's selfies. And then Chapo Guzman's wife, who's like 20 years old or something, deletes her selfies shortly after she posts them, because apparently someone told her to delete them, and nobody else can find any other selfies that she's deleted. And so for some reason, she feels compelled to delete her selfies. But even if we're totally wrong about this, right? Even if it's just a mere coincidence that Chapo's wife happens to show up on the same canal at the same time on the same day with the Speaker of the House of United States Representatives, who has been seen in proximity to her husband, who is accused of taking a $100 million bribe from the biggest narcotics trafficker in recent history. Even if we're totally wrong and that's all just mere coincidence, you got to admit, it looks bad.
It looks extremely bad.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that this trip to Italy, like you said, it was supposed to be a trip to Ghana, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, but when you go to Ghana, don't you stop in Venice first? That's a joke, right? Like it makes no sense, right?
No, it doesn't.
And it makes even less sense if you're on the same canal in Venice with Chapo Guzman's wife, who takes selfies and then deletes them. Anyway, so I posted this. It gets retweeted a few thousand times. Apparently, mainstream media points it out. And then a few days later, none other than the Phoenix field office of the FBI comes out with this memo that says, watch out for right-wing extremists. Well, my former group of friends, back when I was a Democrat, your viewers probably know I'm a walk-away Democrat and social media founder. I had a NASDAQ stock market traded social media company. I sold a bunch of stock. I gave half the money to the Democrats, thinking I was investing in my future. Whole nother story, guys. Anyways, Phoenix is where Janet Napolitano, the former governor, runs her crew that I used to be involved with. And they have deep, deep law enforcement tentacles, and they do disinformation for the Democratic Party. Your viewers probably know I refer to them on my social media as the Arizona Mafia. That's what they call themselves. Not my name, it's their name. And so what a coincidence. Peterson tweets a thread about Pelosi being seen with Chapo Guzman's wife, and then the FBI Phoenix field office, not FBI headquarters, the Phoenix field office, which we all know regularly sends out memos like this, right? They don't.
Right.
All of a sudden sends out this memo. I don't know if they're connected, but I will say that that's exactly the sort of thing Napolitano's Arizona Mafia does. Disinformation and there was an exact quote from a Napolitano news release in 2009 while she was at DHS as DHS secretary with the exact same language about right-wing extremists. So to me, there was a match, but hey, what am I, a researcher or a conspiracy theorist? Take your pick.
Well, I know how I feel about it. I definitely say researcher. You know who else is an employee at that FBI field office?
Who's that?
Jill McCabe, Andrew McCabe's wife.
Yeah, that's right. I'm making a note about that.
Yeah, that was my next question. If you knew if Jill McCabe was associated with any of these people in the Arizona Mafia.
You know, I've heard the name, not in connection with Arizona Mafia. I have a very dear friend who's a former FBI agent, Robin Gritz, who had quite a few problems with the McCabes.
I'm familiar.
Yeah, but no, and but I will say their strongest connections are in law enforcement. Arizona Mafia is the group that brought Mark Sullivan, the former director of the United States Secret Service, into the courtroom in the Nexium trial to try to help get Vanguard out of jail. And so if you can have the former Secret Service director on your payroll, you can certainly probably issue a memo or talk to someone at the FBI field office in your backyard.
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. So have you seen any other coverage of this thread, or how many news outlets did this show up in, and which ones?
I don't have, like you, I don't watch a lot of television anymore, right? We all get our news off of social media. So what happens is people send me messages and they say, hey, JP, we saw your thread on the news. And so I got a bunch of those messages from local sort of regional stations.
Okay.
So it seems to be scattered a little, but I don't know. Clearly somebody was looking at it. I think it got 3,000 retweets or something in about a day.
Yeah, and each tweet in the thread each got, over 1,000 tweets at least if it wasn't the first one.
Yeah,
now,
and that's not because I'm interesting. I'm pretty boring actually, but the Pelosi hanging around with Chapo Guzman's wife, I mean, that's a story. And by the way, the selfies that his wife posted in the canal in Venice, they were carried by The Sun UK, which is a big newspaper with 1 million subscribers. So
I'm going to see if I can pull that up.
I included in my thread actually, so I could have a solid reference there. But when I tweet out something that has sources, I'll indicate it, and I did indicate it. We did not have a source for Pelosi actually meeting with Peña Nieto, which would be even more extraordinary. But I don't have any idea how you'd have to have someone with a camera in the restaurant or something to verify that.
It's an amazing series of events, like the coincidences to end all coincidences for Pelosi, Peña Nieto, El Chapo's ex-wife, all of these people to show up in the same place. So, as far as I'm concerned, there is no such thing as a coincidence, and these people must have been meeting to be discussing something. And if I had to guess, I would imagine it would be something related to the progress that's been made on closing down the border, and probably stemming the flow of drugs. Because I'm sure that El Chapo still has a network that's in operation And I wouldn't be surprised if his wife was, you know, seated at the head as long as he's in prison.
Yeah, no idea. You know, I'm just a computer guy. I never imagined I'd be reporting on Mexico and organized crime, but hey, the internet is a crazy place, huh? And so
Sure
having been sort of dragged into this ongoing conversation about Mexico politics, which is something surprisingly I ended up knowing about from so many years in Mexico with my former Hispanic social network, I've done my best to try to separate fact from speculation. I always report things, whether they're fact or speculation. So the Peña Nieto piece came from a DC person who works for someone who is in proximity to Pelosi. Another sort of walkaway like myself, who used to be a Democrat and now is just kind of in shock at all this news that keeps coming out. There's this thread I posted that some people disagree with, that our parents' Democrat Party doesn't exist anymore. There's a lot of us that sort of look back in history at Democrats being a bunch of hippies that were tree huggers and maybe had ineffective fiscal policy. But whatever the party is now, it's like someone just lit a barn on fire, and it's a bunch of very, very angry sort of communist / socialist types. And I'm not really sure they even know what they stand for at this point, other than trying to get money and power, which seem to be their two top priorities.
It's staggering how far the Democratic Party has fallen. They are so far from their any platform they used to have. It's like they've allowed themselves to be taken over by the most radical leftist elements in the party, and now anybody who is running is pandering to that very small element. And part of me is wondering, you know, I mean, how do they think that they're going to be able to get back into power with the message that they have now? I mean, you know, not that I trust polls, but what polls I have seen are very clear. I mean, you know, there is a majority of the Democratic primary voters that are you know, enjoying what they're seeing. And then once you get to a general election, you know, greater than half of the people who will vote are not interested in the majority of these Democratic policies that we see coming out now.
Yeah, I actually ran a thread about this the other day, and me being not very smart politically, I just tweeted out, you know, hey, everyone who's watching these Democrat debates, these candidates are a joke. You know, what do you think is the possibility that Hillary Clinton ends up parachuting in to run another presidential campaign? I was originally correct. I was corrected instantly by 100 of my followers who replied. And I can tell you what the consensus is amongst conservatives, because they told me, they said, Jeff, you're wrong. You're right about the current candidates being a joke and not posing a real challenge to Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the real deal. However, if there is someone who parachutes in, it's probably not going to be Hillary Clinton. It's probably, everyone seems to think, going to be someone like, dare I say this word on your show, Michelle Obama.
Yeah, very interesting that you should mention that, because I actually have a story pulled up that I was planning on going over, but Michelle Obama apparently says that there is a 0% chance that she's going to be running for president. This has been a very popular theory. People seem to think that, you know, she's, you know, going to be the last great hope for the Democratic Party. But I personally don't see it. I don't think that she has. I don't think she has what it takes, and I don't think that she's going to be able to do it.
Some other names that came up in that thread were Michael Bloomberg, of course, and Oprah, of all people.
Yeah. You know, I've definitely heard Oprah for a long time. I've heard Bloomberg for a long time. You know, at this point, it doesn't seem like I cannot see a single Democratic contender for President Trump. You know, that's just my armchair opinion here. But, you know, we're too far into this. You know, I mean, it is almost 2020, essentially. You know, I mean, anybody who's out there seems to be very weak, ineffectual. They are clearly pandering to just that ultra-liberal base. And even the platforms that they have, you know, they seem to be waffling and wavering on. And there's so much infighting. You know, each of them is going for the jugular of the next.
Yeah, that's why I wonder, just being sort of concerned about disinformation. Yeah. I wonder if all of that is sort of manufactured to buy time for the real candidate to parachute in. Just the theory, guys. Right. I am the worst political expert to listen to, so don't listen to me, at least not on that topic.
Yeah, but it very well could be.
I'm very, very interested to see how this plays out, because right now I don't see any of those candidates even moving the needle. And Democrats have been ineffective. Like, I know Tom Perez. I used to give the chairman of the DNC money. So I know him. I speak better Spanish than him, by the way, and I'm not even Hispanic. He is an ineffective leader. I can say this because I tried to invest in these people. They're not even moving the needle at this point, and they know it. So they're going to have to come up with another strategy.
Yeah, they've been. I think they were counting on the fact that President Trump was going to be removed. You know, they didn't really think they had to do much because we're going to
Mueller.
Yeah, we got Mueller. We're going to get him on obstruction, or we're going to get him on some other impeachable offense.
Right.
And the things that they say, you know, calling for impeachment when there is nothing. There has absolutely been nothing that President Trump has done that even approaches an impeachable offense. No high crimes and misdemeanors. So either they just don't understand the law, or they're hoping that with their rhetoric they're going to keep that base riled up. And, you know, maybe they're going to take it to the streets. You know, maybe they wanted us to hash it out amongst ourselves.
There is no question, I believe, even amongst Democrats, that they overplayed the Mueller hand. They were looking for a quick fix there. And it just didn't happen. I think they're equally as surprised by that as they are still that they didn't win the last election.
Yeah, they are ridiculously out of touch. Oh, and I'm sorry, Muffin. Muffin, what's going on, honey? Come here.
You found someone who knows more about politics than me.
She's always ready to give her opinion. A couple of quick thank yous. Kimberly Bogan, she says, Kim, Kevin, and Lander here. Team Bogan supporting Red Pill 78 and Q family. God bless America, and God bless our awesome President Trump. Thank you for that. Karma Anon, what's up, buddy? One of my mods. He says, I started this journey with you. There's no one better or more humble. Keep exposing the deep state, my friend. You are the original Red Pill for many of us. We love you and all you do, brother. Man, that's wonderful. I really appreciate that. Thanks for that super chat, too. Trisha Nordby just gave a super chat. Thank you for that very generous donation. Chris Hawkins, he says, a late text, I bet you they were eating. Oh, yeah, they were. The Democrats, they were definitely eating, but they were definitely doing some other stuff. And then God's Guy, what's up, my friend? He says, God is not mocked. They will pay dearly for their lack of respect for life and the FF that took place today. Very possible. And then also Ronnie says, Red Pill, really enjoy your reports. God keep you safe. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad you're here with us. New Guardian says, Dingo dollars for the Rawhide Fund, where we bark one, we bark all. Muffin and Chi-Chi appreciate it. White Hat says, so much today, men. My thumbs are on fire. Yeah, lots of people sending out furious tweets all day. And Chris Hawkins, did I make you laugh twice, RP78? Yes, he certainly did. You know, one thing I really wanted to ask you about, Jeff, here is this tweet that you posted saying that it's confirmed there are several new significant stories today, but you've got this picture with Peña Nieto and his wife, and I believe that you had posted something that said that their marriage is a sham. What is that about?
Yeah, a lot of news coming out of Mexico, and I'm ending up as the sort of de facto Twitter Mexico breaking headline interpreter for the Patriots here, which is really a bizarre place to be. But anyways, I've been helping conservatives to understand all this very important news coming out of Mexico that they might otherwise miss. And there's a bunch of stories. One of them, and you'll recognize Peña Nieto. He was the skinny guy. He's about 5'7". I say skinny because he's not just skinny. He looks sickly. Like people were, and I'm not saying this to insult him or be disrespectful. It's just true. I met him one time in New York years ago at a Mexico-U.S. event, and he looked sickly there. But anyways, he was a president of Mexico for the past more or less 6 years. And a lot of the stuff that you heard come up and will continue to hear come up that is being discovered now about Mexico has to do with Peña Nieto. For example, the rumor that, actually it's not a rumor, that Pelosi was in proximity to Chapo Guzman when Chapo Guzman says he paid $100 million bribe to Peña Nieto, which is so strange because Pelosi then comes out and opposes the border wall. She leads the whole United States Democratic Party to oppose the border wall. She never really explains it, why she's so against it. She's just like, no, we can't have it. Anyways, Peña Nieto is now being subjected to all of these investigations by the new president of Mexico, AMLO is his nickname. And one of the headlines that just came out is that Peña Nieto has a sham marriage. His marriage to this attractive Mexican celebrity, Angelica Rivera, which is the English language pronunciation. If there's any Mexicans watching, I apologize for botching her name. Was a sham, and I don't say this for any improper reasons. Viewers, remember, 2 years ago I was a Democrat. I'm very sensitive to human rights and those sorts of issues, but it's just being reported. By the way, not that there's anything wrong with this, that Peña Nieto is actually gay, and this is not a rumor. This is actual news from multiple sources in Mexico that is of interest, and if it's true, it kind of seems like it's true. A lot of things start to make sense, and the fact that his quote-unquote wife, Angelica Rivera, was a sham marriage is extraordinary. Now everybody's asking, what was the purpose for that, aside from making him more electable? She fills in a bunch of missing questions that were there. For example, there's a rumor that Peña Nieto murdered his former stand-in wife.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, lots of stuff that American constituents may not be aware of has been coming up in the Mexican media. And the reason why it's so important is that it's happening right after President Trump finished off this very effective new U.S.-Mexico agreement that replaces NAFTA, right?
Yes.
It's one of the boldest steps an American president has taken in a very long time with Mexico. And then all of a sudden, right after Trump puts in place his New Mexico deal, all of this anti-corruption that we haven't seen in more than 25 years out of Mexico starts happening. And Peña Nieto's exposed, amongst other things, for having a sham marriage. Wow.
It's just incredible, you know. I mean, in the description of the show, I said that you know, is Lopez Obrador the Mexican Trump? Because you know, just like you said, you know, both of these guys come in at roughly the same time, and almost immediately you see just incredible efforts to squash corruption all throughout this continent. You know, in the United States and in Mexico, and it is unprecedented. You know, Mexico has been known as kind of a lawless area for a very long time. I mean, obviously, you know, there's many beautiful places. You know, people go there to vacation. Many people live there very happily. But it seems that there are not too many places that are untouched from this kind of cartel violence that you see. That many murders that El Chapo himself was responsible for. Now, when you say it's rumored that he murdered his former beard, the former wife, do you mean that he had her killed, or did he kill her with his own hands?
It's weird stuff, man. This is like Mexico tabloid headline fodder, and I have to report it as that. But that rumor has been around for years, ever since he was first elected president.
Okay.
Before Peña Nieto was president of Mexico, he was the governor of the state of Mexico, which is it's one of the 32 Mexican states that is next to Mexico City. Mexico City, don't worry guys, I won't turn this into a geography lesson, but you should just know, it's very interesting actually. Mexico City is a capital district, sort of like Washington, D.C. is not a state.
Okay.
So in Mexico, it's Mexico DF, which is Distrito Federal, federal district. And then next door to it is the state of Mexico, where Peña Nieto was governor before he got recruited by the PRI political party to run for and win what many people believe was a fixed election. And people say, and again, this is a rumor, that he killed his former wife by strangling her in a bathtub, which is really it's brutal. Mexican sort of tabloid stuff. But, you know, people have said that for years. That obviously, I don't think it's ever been confirmed, but so it goes from that sort of terrible rumor about Peña Nieto to Peña Nieto being bribed with $100 million by Chapo, which came out at the Chapo trial, to now Peña Nieto being on the run in Spain, right? Which is where he is. This is confirmed. Peña Nieto is outside of Mexico. He's in Spain, and possibly in Italy a few weeks ago with none other than Pelosi herself. What's that all about, Nancy, if it's true?
And El Chapo's wife may be getting another payment for services rendered. So what happened once this came out in the trial of El Chapo? I mean, I would imagine it must have been widely covered in the Mexican press, and it probably caught the attention of some Mexican federal authorities, I would imagine.
It did, and this is what's so interesting about AMLO's administration, because it's been literally 25 years since the time of President Salinas in Mexico, that Mexicans have not seen people, government officials being arrested. What they see in Mexico is if someone runs for office who's not affiliated with the old PRI political party, they get murdered, right? But Mexicans are not used to seeing people getting arrested or charged with crimes. Certainly, Mexico has the apparatus for that. I'm familiar with it. I spent a lot of time in Mexico. I toured many government offices and knew many Mexican politicians during my time running the Que Pasa social network. We had offices in Mexico, hundreds of employees there. And I can tell you, they have a massive bureaucracy. It just hasn't been used for the right reasons. Well, AMLO all of a sudden is starting to charge all of these former PRI officials from Mexico with crimes, which is a strange thing. Mexicans aren't used to it, but it's happening. And it's happening right after our president passed his new United States-Mexico agreement. And also, we should note, due to Trump, Mexico has 21,000 National Guard soldiers on the border, on the northern border, slowing the flow of migrants, which is unprecedented. No other American president has achieved that in terms of U.S.-Mexico relations. I can say this, having served on the board of the Arizona Mexico Commission, which is one of the top Mexico border policy-making groups in the United States for 6 years. I'm not aware of any other American president who's achieved anything even close to that in terms of getting serious about border policy. So there's more progress that we can report out of the Trump administration.
Yeah, it's been pretty incredible, the progress that's been made in such little time. One thing that I really noticed too about the relationship between Lopez Obrador and President Trump is once he was elected in Mexico, there was a lot of rhetoric, it seemed, between them in the public press, and then they met. And it was reported that it was a good meeting. You know, they had lots of things in common. You know, President Trump is very charismatic. You know, very gregarious. As long as you're willing to work with him, I think that he's always going to be a nice guy when he meets somebody. But you know, at the same time, you know, again, publicly, there seemed to be this public sparring between the United States and Mexico, and it all had to do with the flow of illegals over the border. Now, the fact that you just stated there, 21,000 National Guard soldiers along the border, when I spoke with you, that was the first time that I had heard that. All of these other things that we've heard in the press, you know, the hundreds of thousands of people that are streaming across the border, the caravans, the condemnation of the idea of our own sovereignty by the Democrats and Pelosi and Schumer. We did not hear that Mexico was doing anything. You know, the last thing that I had heard was that Mexico agreed to help out with asylum, helping out with asylum and allowing people to, register for asylum there and allowing them to be kept if they were waiting trial in America for asylum. But nowhere did anyone say that Mexico was helping out in that fashion.
Yeah, they are. There's a dramatic drop in illegal crossers last month. Some of the preliminary data I saw was that it was down by 40,000 in a period of 2 weeks. And the reason for that is what they're doing on the Mexico side. It's been said for a very long time by those who are smart about U.S.-Mexico relations that the problem's not going to get resolved until both governments get serious about it. It's not just a U.S. problem, it's a Mexico problem as well. They've got the resources. I always tell people, Mexico is not a poor country, it's a corrupt country.
Yeah.
It used to be out of Spanish-speaking countries, and this is a correct analysis. Some people say it's not a correct analysis, but it is, that Spain was the most relevant sort of influencer of the Spanish-speaking countries. It's not anymore. Mexico is. Anyone who's been to Mexico City knows Spanish people fly over to Mexico City looking for jobs all the time now. They have an annual budget of $300 billion US in Mexico. Their Mexico City airport project right now is $21 billion US. That's just one project. They don't have much sovereign debt. They have the money, they have the resources to do a lot if they have the political will. And Trump is the first American president who has been able to successfully cause Mexico to use their resources to slow the flow that dramatically by using their National Guard. It's a win-win for everybody.
It certainly is, you know, and I would imagine that Mexico is going to suffer in the same way that the United States does if they keep allowing all of these illegals to come up from Central or South America, making their way in these caravans. Because if they get stopped at the border, then they're going to end up staying in Mexico. And I know that people in cities just on the other side of the border, I saw protests there. People who wanted, to maintain the sovereignty of Mexico. They didn't want a flow of illegals there either.
Right.
So, you know, they're going through the same things we are. And I think it's difficult for people because, I mean, I think that many times people have kind of a misconception about Mexico. They don't realize it's a first world nation.
Well, yeah, I don't think they're first world yet, but they're probably, if you look at the list of like 190 economies in the world, Mexico's around number 14. So they're right next to France. They're actually higher than some other European countries that you would think would be wealthier than Mexico, but they're not. They, President Fox, who I used to be a technology advisor to President Fox, believe it or not, which I used to be proud of. Now I feel ashamed of it. I see him making all these ridiculous anti-Trump videos that actually make him look like a fool. They make President Fox look like a fool. But anyways, President Fox used to tell me it was a blessing in disguise that being perceived as a poor country, that nobody would loan money to Mexico because they just don't have much sovereign debt. So when Trump said he was going to make Mexico pay for the wall, he actually knew what he was talking about. Mm-hmm. Like Mexico can write that check. A lot of Americans don't realize it, but they can.
Yep. You know, and whether it's in the form of, a check all on its own, or if it's in the form of negotiated trade deals, it's going to happen one way or the other. You know, Donald Trump will help raise the money, and if it happens because we're doing business with Mexico, then all the better. You know, I mean, I would personally love for Mexico to prosper in the same way that I want the United States to prosper. I think every nation has the right to go ahead and do that. Now, just as a kind of a refresher for anybody that's listening that might not have been listening last time, because we've got even more viewers now than we did before, can you give us just a rundown of the PRI? I mean, you said that they're a corrupt political party, but I mean, they've essentially been the linchpin in the corruption in Mexico for many decades.
Yeah, this is really important for viewers to understand, because no one ever explains this. Like, I didn't understand this at all when I first went to Mexico as a American-born citizen who's as non-Mexican as you can get. My mother is from London. Anyways, I went down there as this sort of pasty white guy that didn't speak any Spanish. And hey, if anyone takes that as a racist comment, don't. I'm the least racist person you'll ever meet. I've planted many trees in my time. But I went down to Mexico not knowing anything about the country, and it was explained to me that the PRI, the Revolutionary Party of Mexico, is the old entrenched political party of Mexico that's controlled everything for more than 100 years. In other words, they had the ability to throw all the elections. The PRI had entrenched people in all the federal agencies, which is still true today. You want to talk about the Mexican swamp. The PRI is the Mexican swamp. They're the old school political party, and they're actually so corrupt that they started launching other political parties because everybody hated them so much. So the voters would try to vote out the PRI candidates by voting for someone from one of the other parties, like the PAN, and then years later, they would realize that the PAN candidate was actually put in there by the PRI. So it's just been like impossible to get rid of them, the PRI, for a very, very long time. Many of us thought Vicente Fox was a reformer. He was the first non-PRI president in a long time. He turned out to be a PRI plant too. When he got out of office, he changed his party from the PN back to the PRI. So, hey, aside from getting this great entertainment of listening to JP bumble about Mexico tonight, you get to learn something too, which is now there's a new party in power in Mexico, which is called Morena, M-O-R-E-N-A, which means brown. I don't know why they call it that, but that's what it's called. The Morena party, which is Lopez Obrador, has power now. Many of us were skeptical as to whether or not this was going to be a real political party or just another PRI invented sham. And when PRI leaders started getting arrested, that's where I said, okay, maybe this is for real. Because it's one thing to say you're going to reform. It's another thing to send out the federales which is the Mexican federal police, to actually start putting people in handcuffs. That has literally started happening. And the top PRI leaders have left Mexico. They've gone to Spain, they've gone to England. There's a pretty good sign that Lopez Obrador's party, for as long as they last, appears to be the first independent party Mexico has had in a long time. Look, I'm as skeptical as anyone about Mexico, but at the moment, it seems like he's doing some good stuff.
Yes, it is pretty staggering, you know. I would love if Mexico and Lopez Obrador was doing it on his own, but I have to think that this has something to do with the meetings that President Trump has had with him and the trade negotiations. President Trump knows that in order to clean up the swamp, he has to do it globally, and Mexico is, you know, besides Canada, obviously it's our closest neighbor. So by right, we cannot be, you know, cleaning the swamp here in America if it also isn't happening south of the border, because he knows that that's where so many of the drugs are coming from.
I was telling people a year ago, you know, if Trump really wanted to use all this political capital to do something great for North America, he'd find a way to shake up the PRI. And lo and behold, the PRI has been shaken up. It's being shaken right now, worse than they have been, I believe, in history. As a matter of fact, there was just an article that came out in the Mexican media that said the PRI is, for all intents and purposes, dying right now.
That's great news.
And so that is great news for everyone in North America. 21,000 Mexican National Guard soldiers on the Mexican side of the border. Slowing immigration is great news for everybody. And let's just hope it continues.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Now, one of the moves that Obrador has played is that of these PRI officials that have been arrested, most recently the former governor of Chihuahua was just arrested, and you know, not only him, but you know, going as far back as 2017, there is a host of former Mexican governors who have been arrested and charged and actually put away. What can you tell us about that?
It is what it is. It's been reported in the Mexican press. Again, it doesn't always make it up to the U.S. press. And then as Americans, you know, sometimes we hear a word from Mexico that, like, we don't understand, like Chihuahua. We think of a little dog running around, right? But actually, this is a really big state in Mexico. It's gigantic. There's millions of people that live there, and they have a I think this guy is accused of stealing $4 billion from the state budget. So, I mean, that is like the difference between politics in the United States and Mexico. You know, these politicians in Mexico, they get access to massive amounts of money, and a lot of time they just rob their states blind. And so to see a PRI governor going down in handcuffs, apparently he was arrested in Italy, incidentally, 2 weeks before Pelosi arrived, by Interpol, is what was announced in the media. So that no one calls us conspiracy theorists, we will quote the actual media report. And that is pretty big news any way you look at it. The underlying message, though, is even bigger news, which means all the other corrupt pre-governors have to be shaken in their boots right now, because this initiative, which is called the Fourth Transformation, they call it the 4T by President Lopez Obrador, is taking effect, and all these guys are getting busted. So it's not a good time to be a corrupt Mexican politician right now.
Not at all. Now, interestingly enough, you said $4 billion. It immediately calls to mind the situation that President Trump just drew everyone's attention to this week, which is namely the situation that Baltimore is in. Elijah Cummings and his district seeing what was something, I believe it was $16 billion in 1 year that was pumped into Baltimore. And as far as I know, they're having trouble accounting for it. And if you walk the streets of Baltimore, you know, you certainly can't tell that $16 billion went into that district.
That's for darn sure. You'd think they could have at least hired an exterminator there to do some rodent control around all the dirty areas where we see these videos of rats running around. And as a matter of fact, I don't understand why so many people found those reports offensive if it's factually true. Like, everybody knows there's that problem exists, and then you factually report it in the news. Everybody comes out and says, oh, you're being racist or insensitive because you're talking about a city planning problem that exists. I don't get it.
No, I don't understand it either. You know, and quite honestly, you know, I don't think that it's meant to be understood. It's the outrage mob. They're trying to get people worked up, trying to do whatever they can to pin this label on President Trump and then anybody who supports him. You know, and I distinctly remember a show on HBO called The Wire several years ago, which detailed Baltimore's drug and gang problem in depth for something like 6 or 7 seasons, and no one ever called the writers of that show racist for bringing it to the forefront. Go ahead.
That's why I say when we look back and try to understand what the Democrat Party stands for now, it's hard to identify that because they seem to just be very angry all the time. And when I make this statement, look, I am no Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates, but in my time, I did invest substantial. I got invited to the same events those guys did inside the Democratic Party. I wrote some of my own big checks, and I was around these leaders for a long time. And when I say that I don't understand what they stand for anymore, I don't think I'm a real big shot, but I'm somebody at least who was around enough to try to understand the message. And I view them as totally lost.
Yeah, 100%. You know, part of it is I think that the world has gotten just so bogged down with all of the problems, and the fact that they've just been serially they haven't done anything to address any of these issues. You know, they've been giving us rhetoric over and over every election cycle, you know, telling us that they're going to do this or they're going to do that. Elijah Cummings has been running for something like 20 years, saying the exact same thing. Baltimore is in worse shape than ever, and now President Trump is finally somebody who's willing to stand up and say something about it and call him out on the carpet.
Yeah, and I can say that as time went on, because I started associating with Democrat Party interests when I was in Arizona around 2002, and I was around them until about 2014. So I guess that's a while. Over the years, I saw the leadership less and less interested in the political issues and their constituents, and more interested in themselves and money. And I say this because they were all sort of trying to seek out these life of luxury arrangements, right? Mm-hmm. Like we see Pelosi dining at a 5-star hotel in Italy. That's exactly what I was seeing. When I worked with Janet Napolitano, she started wanting to fly on private jets all the time. Pelosi, I just tweeted the other day because it's true, Pelosi was flying on Jeff Bezos jets all the time. I don't know if this has been publicly reported, but I can tell you it's a fact. She used to tell me, Jeff has loaned me his jet again. We're going to take it to Reno. We're going to take it to New Mexico to ski and Taos. And then Napolitano started using private jets. I know Howard Dean is someone who I was very close with. A lot of these people started sort of seeking out life of luxury, for lack of a better term. And the leadership, the entrenched leadership, has been aging too. It's almost like they want to go off into the sunset of their retirement in a sort of golden parachute. You know, I think the Democrat Party certainly is on its way out.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if they survived through the 2020 election cycle. You know, it's very clear that they are on the take in so many ways. You know, because they come in with nothing and they leave multimillionaires on a civil servant's salary. How is that possible? You know, I mean, I realize that they're able to get stock tips, they're able to get insider information, they're able to trade on the information from companies that come before the committees that they're representing, and that happens all the time. It's not illegal for members of Congress to act on that information, which is shocking to me, but it's not illegal for them in the same way that it would be illegal for us, you know? So the game is rigged, and clearly for so many years, they have been taking advantage of that, and it's just been a system where they can get rich, they can get happy, they can rob and pillage the American public the entire time they're there, keep giving us the exact same promises, and then never delivering on anything.
In some of the stories we would hear, like if you're close to Democrat Party operatives, particularly during Mr. Obama's administration, some of the stories I heard were just mind-blowing. Like I heard a story of a check that was accidentally written out of DHS for $400 million, and someone accidentally signed it, and it accidentally went to a company that was some kind of startup, and somebody got fired over it, right? Like, yeah, you would hope they at least get fired, right?
Right.
I mean, and the power and influence these people wield by controlling the office of the president is monumental. And then you see some of their actions, right?
Yep.
Napolitano's time was the one I know the most about. She's DHS secretary because I was literally in her inner circle. All of the agency directors had scandals. The Secret Service director had a prostitution scandal. Napolitano herself and her ICE director, Susie Barr, is the only time in federal government history that a female director of a federal agency, Susie Barr is the director of ICE, has been sued for sexual harassment.
Yep.
They call it Napolitano's frat house, right?
Yep.
These are people that I refer to as Arizona Mafia. So yeah, I have a bunch of stories about them. And as you talk about the things that they are doing, don't forget all the biotech and genetic engineering interests too, which I tweeted out a few cloning threads, and like people in the beginning, they're like, oh, Peterson's really a nutcase. Not only is he saying that these people were involved with Mexican political parties, but he's saying that they're cloning. Look, I can't make up these stories. Pelosi herself was very close with John Sperling, who's the founder of the University of Phoenix, a very big for-profit school in the United States, one of the biggest. And Mr. Sperling spent more than $40 million trying to clone his dog. Yeah, well,
I mean, I love my dogs, guys. Don't get me wrong. That's a lot of money.
I hope Muffin didn't hear that. But it's a true story. It's been reported in the press. And so many of us who know what's going on there, we see all the money that's changed hands, and we know or are highly suspicious that the reason why Napolitano departed Homeland Security as DHS secretary and went to the University of California is not for political reasons, it's for monetary reasons. The University of California controls some of the biggest genetic engineering and biotech interests in the country, not to mention Planned Parenthood and all the other interests that are there that serve Democrat-connected interests on the financial side of things. So there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes, folks. When it comes to Democrats, I'm here to tell you, a lot of it has to do with cold, hard cash. These people are very, very interested in money, more than you might expect. And it didn't surprise me one bit to see Elijah Cummings with a $16 million painting and then flying over to Venice and dining in a five-star hotel with Pelosi, because that's what the whole upper echelon of the Democratic Party is trying to do now, is live a life of luxury.
Yeah, they are the new American royalty, basically.
That's right.
Couple of quick thank yous. Lynn Little says, love your shows. Thank you. Thank you for that, Lynn. Appreciate the super chat. Daniel GP says, watch John Mark's YouTube video. Thanks, RPN. I'll have to check it out. I'm not familiar with his channel. Andrew Belcher says, it's got the rat's name all over it. Stay vigilant. I think in reference to El Paso. Thank you for that, Andrew. Michael Kenny, thank you for the super chat. Rob Wilson, thank you as well. And Jennifer Small says, I read your cloning tweets. Is Biden a clone?
That's a good question. Actually, here's my feeble attempt at humor, but it's actually just true. I was going to say that they're going back to the topic of ineffective Democrat candidates. As I almost sent out a tweet without even thinking about it, right, the other day, which was, can you imagine how Joe Biden would have dealt with Kim Jong-un? And then I realized all of those creepy Joe threads. I don't want to think about that image.
Yes.
By the way, just a correction for one viewer, because I'm trying to watch the chat here. Superstastic Barbie said morena in Spanish means black. And so here I'm going to debate you on Spanish language. Black in Spanish is actually negro.
Yep.
And morena is brown. So Mexico's new political party does call themselves the Brown Party, which I think is a politically correct reference to skin color. They're proud of their indigenous heritage. Mexico's biggest hero, Benito Juarez, the George Washington of Mexico, was an indigenous person of dark skin. I mean, they're very proud of that. But so anyways, getting back to the Biden question, I have no idea if Biden's a clone. I sort of don't think so, but I can tell you the upper interests of the Democrat Party is very interested in cloning. And the doctor, I have another bombshell thread that I am getting ready to tweet, but I'll tell you about it here if you want to know.
Please.
The doctor they go to for this stuff, which I believe, here's a breakthrough for you, I believe explains Hillary's shakes, right? You know how she shakes?
Yes.
And Biden slurs his words, right?
Yeah.
And a few of the other top Democrats act strange like that, right?
Pelosi and her brain
Pelosi, who constantly sounds like she's intoxicated. Now, I've been around Pelosi, and I got to tell you, she drinks a lot.
I would imagine
she does. So, and when she sounds that way, maybe she is drunk. But here's an with all due respect to Miss Pelosi, we don't want to offend anyone. Here is a theory that's backed by some real evidence that nobody's heard. So, viewers, you want to hear a big one? Here it is. Go research Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong. Patrick is a billionaire in Los Angeles. He bought the Los Angeles Times. He is very friendly with my former group, Arizona Mafia, Napolitano people, and he invested in a think tank in Phoenix, Arizona called TGen. TGen is the Translational Genomics Institute. I have been told by top Democrats, and I was told by top Democrats that they were receiving genetic therapy, rejuvenation, life enhancement, age extension therapy at TGen. Okay?
Wow.
So that is a pretty breakthrough piece of information that I am getting ready to do some more tweeting on. I want to make sure it's all supported with the right links. But if correct, because and as I put this together, I realized if that's true, because Patrick is a big deal, okay? Patrick is doing some of the most breakthrough genetic research in the United States of America. He's got the money to do it. He holds a bunch of patents. And TGen is like the next phase of the Human Genomics Project, where Human Genomics Project, they were doing the gene sequencing. But I guess in TGen now, they're taking the lessons learned from Human Genome Project and they're applying it to experimental therapeutic gene medicines. Top Democrats are deeply involved with Patrick, okay? And Patrick is very friendly with Phil Gordon, the former mayor of Phoenix, who used to be a friend of mine. I was there when they broke ground on TGen. I can confirm all these people are very, very interested. They were fundraising for TGen. And they're also interested in life extension stuff. So that would explain Hillary's shakes. That would explain Biden's slurring of the words, and maybe Pelosi. I don't know. These people are interested in money. They're interested in fixing themselves up, and they're very close with Patrick Soon-Shiong. So there's some info for your researchers.
This is incredible information, Jeff. Thank you very much for dropping that on the show. You guys heard it here first. You know, I can totally believe this. Okay, this is obviously something that it seems to me these people would do. They are definitely interested in life extension. They are definitely interested in vanity, making themselves look good. We obviously have seen many of these people get extensive plastic surgery. Personally, I think that that's one of the reasons that we can say that Joe Biden looks kind of different than he did in the past. I have a certain people have a certain look when they've gotten facelifts. John Kerry, as an example, his face looks as if it's being pulled back around his skull, much tighter than it was many years ago when he was running for president. But with unlimited sums of money and probably being willing to accept some experimental techniques like this, I would imagine it wouldn't be all that difficult to get it from someone who's trying to do this research themselves. I mean, this kind of stuff isn't exactly ethical, I would imagine. If they're doing experimental techniques, do you think that their odd behavior is due to a treatment that they received that perhaps they didn't know what the end result would be and it didn't end up so good for them? Or is it due to something else?
Yeah, I don't know. But like I sent out a tweet and I started talking about some of this cloning stuff. And I understand that, like, okay, so conservatives don't know who I am, right? I mean, the only place anyone in the world knows who I am is in Arizona, where I ran our state's first publicly traded consumer-facing.com company. It went public on the NASDAQ stock market, and I had my picture in the paper a few times. And so all of a sudden, the bar is not very high in Arizona, a place that I never imagined I would end up being born in California. But a few people in Arizona know who I am, but nobody anywhere else has any idea who I am. And I tweeted out a few things on Twitter about knowing top Democrats. And everyone's like, Jeff, you're so full of it. You don't know anybody. I was like, look, I'm telling you, Chelsea Clinton told me her mom was treated in Phoenix. Okay. And they're like, you're so full of it, Jeff. And then I posted my picture with Chelsea Clinton. We were standing together in Phoenix where she told me that literally on the same day. Right. And And then of course, that generated a bunch of patriots sending me messages like, I'm going to throw up, take down that picture, right? Well, I'm sorry, guys. I'm just trying to document history, right? So
Right.
I realized, like, look, I'm not a political guy. I was doing this for business networking. I didn't hold political positions. I was just friendly with Napolitano and a bunch of our people by virtue of having a big technology company at the time. And when Nexium broke, the Nexium cult scandal, I realized all these people were involved with it. That's what tied together all these pieces I didn't understand. I saw Brennan Straka's walkaway thing. I said, you know what? I'm going to do this walkaway thing. And all of a sudden I realized Donald Trump is a pretty effective president, and I've become a fan. So when I talk about Democrat stuff, you got to understand, I was around these people for a very long time. And I always had my eyes open. Like, I know what they're doing, right? And I was in the top tier of donors. So I got invited to a lot of events. And so when I tell you, like, I know these people were around TGen, okay? I can't tell you exactly what they're doing with TGen, but I can tell you they're all around it. And Patrick Soon-Shiong, who is like the top guy for genetic engineering in the United States and maybe even the world right now. And the guy's a billionaire. Everybody knows who he is. He was deeply vested in TGen. And these same Democrat figures that are showing up with the Twitches and ticks, they're all friends with Patrick. And I know they all hang around TGen. So there's some research that needs to be done there to put together what may be a very interesting story. I know they're doing a whole bunch of cloning research on dogs, poor things. Mm-hmm. And that's a fact that can be confirmed. Who knows what else?
Also, I have the TGen website pulled up here, and it looks like John McCain, no name himself, was deeply involved with these people as well.
My old neighbor, yeah.
He was
everything else isn't crazy enough. I used to watch him walking around in his slippers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We lived in the same condo building, 2211 East Camelback, which is not doxing anybody because it's published all over the internet. And there's the condo building is 14 stories high. So there's a whole bunch of people that live in there, and they've got plenty of security that they changed out for Secret Service agents when McCain was running for president. I was there. Spent many afternoon with the former senator. He really likes Costco pizza. I used to have Costco pizzas with him. And so there's, a lot of insight into Arizona politics there. But I don't live in Arizona anymore. On the U.S. side, I live in Boston. So I have nothing to do with these people other than being in lawsuits with them now.
So yeah, what's going on with that? Any word on what's happening?
This is pretty interesting. There was a big political scandal during Mr. Obama's time called Fast and Furious. I'm sure you're familiar with it.
Definitely.
Fast and Furious involved allegations of gun running down to none other than Mexico on the watch of Mr. Dennis Burke, which is a former United States attorney. And so there's a renewed interest in Fast and Furious. Mr. Burke, as I left Napolitano's group, he was tasked with the job of charging me with a crime. Mr. Burke is the former United States attorney, which means he was the boss over all the law enforcement in Arizona. And so what these Democrats do, and I have this theory that it comes from the Mexican PRI because it's a Mexican PRI tactic. When they don't like someone, they try to have them charged with a crime. That's what we saw happen with the President of the United States. And Burke was tasked with having me charged with a crime. So they filed a civil lawsuit against me, and we've been litigating over that. I filed a civil lawsuit against them. We've been litigating over that. Well, theirs just reached a point where there are 21 plaintiffs that are involved in the lawsuit discovered that Mr. Burke's allegations are false. And I wouldn't say this on a recorded video if it was not true. The litigation against me has been suspended in Arizona because guess what? Mr. Burke lied about the facts. Big surprise. He just like he lied in Fast and Furious. And he was called a leaker and a liar, and he resigned his position as United States attorney to protect, take your pick, either Mr. Holder or Janet Napolitano. He is protecting someone so that that inquiry would not continue. A lot of people say that President Trump is going to reopen the inquiry into Fast and Furious and Benghazi. The two might be related. And so we're very interested to see if that happens. And in case anyone is interested, little old me is in a lawsuit with Mr. Burke where he's just been proven to be a liar again on the court record. And so if things do end up coming out in DC, and anybody wants to look over it all at our lowly lawsuit, it certainly probably can be used as evidence.
That is quite good news. I'm glad to hear that. Do you have anything that you're going to be pursuing against him for trying to lie about you in court?
Yeah, well, I sued him. People that follow my Twitter account, and again, this is like a lot of people haven't heard of Dennis Burke, but let me put it in context for you. He is best friends with Rahm Emanuel. So, and Burke is called by national press, by mainstream media, quote unquote, the best connected United States attorney in Obama land. And so he's a fixer. As the various Obama scandals start to break, I think your researchers are going to see Mr. Burke's name on a lot of them. And that's why he's kind of interesting for people that are interested in anti-corruption initiatives. Also, Mr. Burke was Claire Bronfman's attorney in NXIVM.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So if you followed NXIVM, you know the human fright experiments where they were showing videos of people being beheaded to more than 100 American women and terrorizing them. Okay, well, Mr. Burke represented Claire Bronfman's Ethical Science Institute, ESI, and helped to defend that entity from allegations of improper conduct. So really a stand-up guy here. And I sued him in federal court in Boston last December for defamation of character for $100 million. That lawsuit is marching forward. It will be decided on the merits. But I have to say, when you go to court and you are discovered that you lied in another lawsuit to try to help yourself, and you lied to 21 plaintiffs to get them to sue someone else as a weapon, it's probably not going to help your case by the time you reach the jury, particularly if you have a prior history of lying. So look, the only reason I'm going on so much about Mr. Burke is I think a lot of you, as you unravel Obama stuff, you're going to be looking for names deep inside the Democrat Party that can help you with your research. Dennis Burke is one that can lead you into a lot of places you may not have looked before that is a highly relevant name. Just like if you are familiar with some of the Hillary Clinton email deletion threads that are going around, you need to be looking at Cheryl Mills and Justin Cooper. Mr. Cooper is a name that often gets missed. He was the IT guy that was working for the Clintons, is a good friend of my former friend David Rapa in New York. These are the people you need to be looking at. Oh, and bless his soul, Tom Fitton at Judicial Watch took Mr. Cooper's deposition a few months ago. Yep. And no one else has even looked at. Sometimes I think Tom Fitton at Judicial Watch is doing the job of like 3 federal agencies that refuse to back up the president of the United States. That guy needs some kind of a medal.
Yeah, Tom Fitton is doing the heavy lifting. I would love to see Tom Fitton actually officially appointed into some situation in the United States government in the Trump administration. I think that he would do just an amazing job. The only thing I'm worried about is that if he is no longer with Judicial Watch, are they going to continue to be as effective? I know it's a large organization. They have many people working for them, but he truly is the lifeblood of Judicial Watch. You know, under their former tenure, I know that Larry Klayman started them, but, you know, since Tom Fitton has been involved, he has just been behind some of the most incredible information that has been released by the federal government. Many, 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 many wonderful things.
And he's documenting this stuff. Like that info I just gave you, nobody would know unless they were deep inside the Democrat Party. So I'll repeat the name just for your viewers. Do some research on Justin Cooper, who is a IT consultant. He's a guy that actually apparently did the bit bleaching, the erasing of Hillary's hard drive. And Tom Fitton, bless his soul, got Justin Cooper's deposition about 2-3 months ago, which is just amazing when you think about it.
Yeah, we actually covered it here on the show, so some of the people here might have seen it, but very, very interesting stuff. Now, I actually have an article here specifically from Gateway Pundit that is talking about this very thing, talking about how the FBI actually also helped Hillary erase and bleach bit data off laptops, as well as helping her to hammer the phones. This is some new information that's been released, but it says, have you seen this today?
Yeah, I followed the whole thing. I mean, how about that image, right? I mean, just think about it for a moment as we imagine this image. If you're an FBI agent, you're supposed to be, and many of them are, extremely professional individuals, right? But we grow up in the United States, we go to school, we're taught who's the good guys, who the bad guys, and who's the small-time cops and who's the big-time cops. When we think of an FBI agent, we think of a person who arrives in a business suit and adheres to the highest standards of character.
Yep.
Right? Now, think about what happened in this case. You got an FBI agent hammering Hillary Clinton's phone to smash it so there's no evidence left over. Come on, guys. Like, are you serious? It's like, are you kidding me? You couldn't make up these stories. That's why I keep saying, you couldn't make up these stories if you tried. These stories are so insane. I believe this part of history will go down as an extraordinary period of history in American history. Like, there's some other big personalities out there aside from Tom Fitton that have been tweeting, this is all bigger than Watergate.
Yes.
And I think that's true. But you don't always realize that when you're in the middle of it. When you're in the middle of it, it's like you can't always see, but then history will teach future generations that this was an extraordinary period.
It has been a surreal idea to think that that our own government, these paragons of justice and righteousness, have been so complicit in helping the most corrupt people that we have seen in politics, probably in our lifetime. I mean, they've been basically just completely filled with hubris. They never thought that they would be caught. I think that's why they've acted with the type of actions that they did. To imagine an FBI agent hammering a phone, actually destroying evidence in that fashion. I mean, not to mention the immunity agreements that they gave to Hillary's staff to give information. I mean, they didn't give anything that was really worthwhile, at least nothing that's come out yet. But it's just incredible to think about this stuff. I mean, it is.
On the topic of the FBI, I'm sure you've been discussing Mr. Mueller's testimony.
Yes.
And then, of course, I can't help but come back to the recent raids, whether you love him or hate him, on Mr. Roger Stone, that were orchestrated to be a spectacle. And it brings me back to the question of the FBI's political independence, because it's like, is this really necessary to go take a gentleman who poses no law enforcement risk in his bathrobe and have however many agents, 30 or something, I don't remember the exact number, show up at his house like a commando raid and tip off CNN ahead of time so that they're there to film the whole thing? I mean, is this really necessary, guys? And what's the purpose? Like, you got to ask yourself at the end of the day, what's the purpose?
They're trying, in my opinion, they're trying to impugn his character, I mean, they want to show, oh, Roger Stone is a bad guy. We sent the FBI to bust him up. No mind that James Comey's former assistant is now working for CNN, and he was on the scene, 4 hours prior, just waiting for it all to go down. But, on the subject of Roger Stone, he recently won in court access to the redacted portions of the Mueller report. Do you have any ideas on what may be included in there?
You're going to know better than I am, because admittedly, not a high bar, but you're a lot smarter politically than me, as are most of your viewers. But I will say it's refreshing to see, as we do wade through all of these very complex issues, sometimes we have to go up to the appeals level to get the courts to rule correctly, but it does appear as though the courts are consistently coming through for us on the very important questions over time, if not immediately, over time. And that still makes me feel pretty good about where we're going to end up over the long term.
I have to agree, Jeff. Nick L., thanks for that super chat, said, our futures can become bright again. The agenda is clear. Where we go one, we go all. And that's right. This is one thing that I love to stress. Over time, that's a good way to think about it, because although we may be hungry for justice, we're thirsty to get this taken care of right now. We want to see people pay. We want to see some people on the other side, people that we actually know have committed actual crimes against the United States, acts of treason against our country, rather than seeing people like Roger Stone or George Papadopoulos, caught up for process crimes, or perhaps railroaded for something, a text that might have been worded in a shady manner. We've got people that we know were involved with crimes that ended up, ending in the death of American citizens, people on the border, law enforcement officers, such as Fast and Furious. And for years, we've seen these people go away scot-free. But, you know, I'd like to say that Mitch McConnell in the Senate just got through, I believe, another 13 judges that were appointed by President Trump. He got them confirmed. And that is a huge part of it, is, you know, flushing out that judiciary, because, you know, that's probably one of the most important areas of the swamp. We can bring all the charges we want against all the criminals we want, and if we have a bunch of compromised judges that were placed in there by, you know, former Democratic presidents, they are not going to rule on the side of law. They're going to rule on the side of their puppet masters and the people that they're looking to protect.
That's right, and that is one of the things that is the most concerning, I know, to the President of the United States when he's looking at that federal bench. And you're right, he has been having an incredible amount of success. On this topic, one other thing I was going to mention tonight, please, that I feel partially responsible for, I don't know if I told you this in our prior interviews, but while I was in Arizona, I helped to start the political career of Kyrsten Sinema. And so I know Kyrsten very well. I was with her from the very first moment that she started her political career at the local state level. I was with her over the years, both on a friendship level and on a professional level. And I've watched her rise to the United States Senate. And I got to tell you, she is voting a lot with conservative interests, even though she is historically from that same base. She wrote the foreword to Janet Napolitano's book, who is obviously an Obama lifer, if you will. Yep. And so I don't know what to think about my old friend, Kyrsten Sinema. I kind of believe she's like somewhat of a Manchurian candidate in there, that they have driven towards the appearance of looking one way when she actually may be another way. And so on the topic of surprise candidates for the President of the United States that may show up out of nowhere, I think her name needs to be in the equation. You know, they ran Obama when he was very inexperienced, but he was an eloquent speaker, or so said the media. That's yes. How he was pre-framed to people as an eloquent speaker. And Kyrsten ticks many of those same boxes. People who know her, like me, say, or tended to say in the past, that she's brilliant. She's a great speaker. She's a lawyer. Her rise has been unstoppable. And she is what you would characterize as whip smart. So I would not be surprised if she showed up somewhere here in the national conversation.
You know, I guess I could see that as well. She's kind of she's straddling that line, you know, like she's like a conservative Democrat, I guess, you know, when people look at her, the things she's done. Now, one thing that I'm interested in is the race between Kyrsten Sinema and the woman that she was running against was very contentious. Did you hear anything about that on the ground there in Arizona? I mean,
well, what I can tell you is I describe him this way as me being a 47-year-old man. It sounds funny, but I use this term anyways. My former best friend, right? Sounds like we're in high school. Marco Lopez, who was my neighbor in Arizona, and Janet Napolitano's senior advisor. Marco is now the senior advisor to Carlos Slim out of Mexico and his 400,000 employees. Marco is from Nogales, Arizona, and he's on this group I call the Arizona Mafia. Marco brought his friend Adrian Fontes up from Nogales, his hometown, to be the county recorder in Maricopa County, which covers Phoenix, before Kyrsten ran for office. Okay, they're the ones that count the votes. And so there's a lot of talk about who would have had the power or the interest to have done something, who knows what, with the election. And the place to look, if you're a researcher that is looking at the recent Arizona elections and how they went down, is at Adrian Fontes, who, by the way, when he was questioned by the media about election irregularities, came out with several expletive, vulgar remarks that made headlines, something like F you, to the reporter who asked him, right?
Wow.
Yeah, real professional.
Classy guy, yeah.
That's right. And they quoted him, by the way. That was like the headline in quotes, right? Maricopa County reporter says, F you, right? And his parents must be proud. And with all due respect for Mr. Fuentes, or as they say in Spanish, con todo respeto, these guys, who knows what they did with Kirsten Sinema's election. I will say there's a investigation that had been started by the Republican Party in Arizona by a lawyer there who is a trusted fellow. So hopefully they'll get to the bottom of it.
I certainly hope so. And I think that going into 2020, it's going to be a key. You know, I mean, if that sort of thing happens again, then we're going to find ourselves in a real bad spot. But something tells me that they're working on this behind the scenes, and I know that they have done a lot to try and safeguard anything like that from happening again. You know, this is it. You know, it's just incredible to me watching those returns come in, and all of a sudden there's all of just, you know, a bunch of magical votes that just showed up, and that lead from her opponent just eroded, and then the next thing you know, Kirsten's in the office. It was pretty incredible to watch. It happened in a couple of different states.
This is an important piece of history. I'll take your viewers back to Mexico for a moment, if I can.
Please.
A famous piece of Mexican history were the 1988 elections. And yes, this is still a relevant story, folks, just like old American history is relevant. It's one of the most famous, notorious elections in the history of Mexico. A gentleman named Cardenas was running against Carlos Salinas and winning, by the way. President-elect or President candidate Cardenas was up in the polls. And then in this very famous story, Mexico's election computer crashed all of a sudden in 1988. And when the computer came back online, Carlos Salinas was winning by a landslide. Well, this is a famous story in Mexico because Carlos Salinas, of course, started the period. It's called neoliberalism in Spanish. I can actually say that in Spanish, which is crazy. That lasted 25 years, that brings us to today. But during the Mexican period of neoliberalism, under President Salinas and Zedillo and Fox and the others that have followed them, Calderon, there was so much corruption, it was crazy. And we always saw this sort of ballot altering, ballot burning, ballot stealing, knocking on doors, paying people to alter their ballots. Some of the same things have been reported in the recent Arizona elections where Sinema won. And I mention this because it's been reported in the press. This is not conspiracy theory stuff. It's actually reported in the Republican Party's investigation into election irregularities in Arizona. These same things I'm talking about, dumpster diving for ballots that could be filled in and mailed in, apparently happened. Wow. These are Mexican tactics. I don't say this to be racist, right? There's this thought sometimes if you say the word Mexico, you sound like you're racist. No, guys, number one, I'm the Que Pasa founder, okay? I did a whole bunch to promote Mexican interests in the United States. I learned Spanish. They're very respectable to Mexican people. But I got to tell you, these election tactics that we saw in Arizona are old school Mexico PRI ballot altering tactics. And so I keep telling people that the Democrats are working with the Mexican PRI political party. They're learning from them. The whole concept of investigating a president, trying to delegitimize a president by investigating him, the Mueller investigation, that whole concept is classic neoliberalism from the Mexican PRI. That's what Salinas did to his opponents the second he got into office. Wow. And in subsequent elections. And so I keep telling people, at some point, you're going to realize that the Mexican PRI is funded with billions of dollars. They control billions of dollars, right? As we see, I was saying on my other interview, sometimes as Americans, we think of Mexico and like we're watching a movie about Mexico and the screen turns to black and white and we see a picture of a donkey, right?
Yep.
Because it's a border town. Yeah, well, I got news for you. There's 136 million people there. And even if their income is lower than the United States, they're still making $15,000, $20,000 a year, okay? So you tax them at Mexico's high tax rates, 35, 40%. You've got 136 million people making 20 grand a year, or I don't know, let's say 80 million people making 20 grand a year. You got some money in the system. Yep. Mexico's budget right now is 300 billion a year, okay? So I keep telling people, you may be very surprised when you find out that the Mueller investigation was pushed not only by the Democrats, but by the Democrats' new best friends, which is the Mexican PRI. The concept of a Mueller investigation itself is a PRI tactic, all right? And so I think that's going to surface through time, through history, and it will be a monumental piece of overlooked information that really surprises people.
Wow, incredible. So is there anything to show that the PRI is, perhaps working here on American soil? Or do you think the Democrats are going down there to work with them and getting the information? Or do they actually have a presence here in America?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they're being connected through lobbyists. There's a big law firm in New York. Sorry, guys, I don't know who this is going to make angry when I say this, but there's a big law firm called Wilkie Farr and Gallagher, which is one of New York's top high dollar law firms. Like when people look up that firm, they're not going to believe they represent the Mexican PRI because I'm not sure if the Democratic Party could even afford them. They probably couldn't. But anyways, they use them. The PRI uses a strategic planning firm in the United States called McKinsey, right?
Yes, we're familiar with McKinsey.
Yeah, this is a very high dollar firm. There's a recent quote out of one of the managing directors of McKinsey gave a quote in an internal investigation. He said, "I resigned from McKinsey because I realized my bosses were representing political interests that don't have problems beheading people." And
oh, wow.
I think he was talking about Mexico when he said that. Again, this has all been reported in the press. This is not conspiracy theory stuff. This is factual stuff. And then, of course, the NXIVM, going back to the NXIVM cult, NXIVM was conducting human flight experiments on over 100 American women. And the videos they were showing them were Mexican cartel-style videos. I mean, it's crazy. We're supposed to believe that NXIVM was being run just by this pudgy loser 55-year-old white guy named Keith Raniere who liked to play volleyball with a bunch of women. That's sort of this, and I think that happened. But you got to remember, NXIVM was doing orchestrating political agendas in Libya. NXIVM was doing human flight experiments. NXIVM was involved in human trafficking. Like, I don't think Keith Raniere had the logistical experience, political or otherwise, to be pulling off all that stuff. And then you have the son of the former president of Mexico, of Carlos Salinas himself. You have Emiliano Salinas is the #2 person in command and control of NXIVM. So that's the PRI right there.
Has anything happened with him in regards to his affiliation with NXIVM? Have there been any charges brought against him in Mexico?
No. So AMLO, the new president in Mexico, recently was quoted saying that he's not interested in going after Salinas' son, much to the chagrin of Mexicans who, I always say, like, nobody hates that family more than 100 million Mexicans down there, right? And by the way, this is not just my opinion. Go and find any Mexican person who is older than about age 30 or 35, and they'll tell you the same thing. The young people don't always understand the 25-year history behind that story. But in the United States, the bombshell news that came out was that Emiliano, who I knew, by the way, I met Emiliano in person. I've never met his dad, thankfully, but I met him. He was named as a co-conspirator in NXIVM by the prosecutor, Moira Penza, in the Eastern District of New York. And when she mentioned that, it exploded in the Mexican news. There were, I would say, 20 or 30 news publications all over Mexico ran the story that Carlos Salinas' son has been called a co-conspirator. Nobody knows if there will be more charges brought in the NXIVM case since the last trial concluded. But there was a recent thread that suggested the Northern District of New York is now going to be filing some charges in November. The previous case was in the Eastern District of New York. So that's your NXIVM update too. A lot of people are interested in that very confusing case.
Most definitely. No, I think that's great news. I certainly hope that there's going to be charges brought because, I mean, we know that they wield a tremendous amount of power down there in Mexico. And obviously it extends much further than that throughout North America, United States and up into Canada. 20,000
members. There was a recent memo. I didn't have any idea that NXIVM had 20,000 members. But that is something, particularly when you understand that many of them were investing their life savings, like all their money, sort of like Scientology.
Yep.
I have, and I only say this because it's true. Jennifer Lopez was a good friend of mine for years when I ran Que Pasa. We had a business deal with her. and I knew her over the years. And in a very strange turn of events, she offloaded her father onto me when I was running a recent startup, when I was involved with Dennis Burke in Mobile Corp. And she said, I can't give my dad, she told me, I can't give my dad any money because he gives it all to Scientology.
Oh, wow.
He's just completely brainwashed.
That's really sad. That's really, really sad. Real quick, just a couple more thank yous. God's Guy says, make America godly again, and it will be great, great guest, great show, great family right here. Yeah, excellent conversation tonight, Jeff. Thanks again for coming on. And then Bullwinkle says, RP, please remind your guest to stay away from doorknobs. He's treading muddy waters. Yeah, definitely, Jeff. You want to make sure that you're protected at all times. You've been dropping a lot of incredible information tonight. You know, have you had to do anything to safeguard yourself and your family?
Let me tell you why we haven't been so concerned with that.
Okay.
Number one, a lot of the stuff I talk about is already out there in the news. People just don't know where to look for it because it comes from Mexico. And so, like, when I tell you that Enrique Peña Nieto's marriage was called a sham, that's not me guessing or just making up a theory. It's reported all over the Mexican media right now, but like the US media doesn't pick up on it, right? So I end up being the connector for that story. And other things that I've been talking about, Nexium and my former group of friends, Arizona Mafia, and a lot of this stuff has come to the surface. Everybody knows it. It's not a big secret anymore. I was actually contacted by a member of the United States intelligence community a year ago when I first went out on Twitter and started talking about this stuff. And they identified themselves. I was able to figure out who it was. And they asked me all these drug questions. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not your drug guy. You know, I was around all these political people, but I have no idea. You know, all I know about is reading the Mexican press and then rumors I heard from my old group of friends. And I can make some pretty good guesses about how things happen too. So I think it's very useful to have a guy like me who was deep in the Democratic Party for a long time talking to patriots now because I understand how they work. Do I have inside information about where the bodies are buried? No, I don't. And so, you know, I was actually contacted by someone who purported to be from Mexican intelligence too, which was very weird.
Ooh.
And I just told them, and I continue telling them to this day, I have no disrespect for the Mexican people. My hope is that Donald Trump will unite the Mexican people and the American people like the former administrations have been ineffective in doing that. Look, Donald Trump is on the verge of uniting North and South Korea. I mean, talk about the art of the deal.
No, it's incredible the things that he's been able to accomplish, and you know, even more so when you look at the harassment that he gets from the press. You know, if it would have been any other president, you know, bringing peace to the Korean Peninsula, can you imagine anyone else would have immediately gotten a Nobel Peace Prize? They would have been heralded as the man of the year. But instead, you know, because it's Donald Trump, you know, he's pandering to dictators.
That's right. I have a very nice young man who was helping me with some of my technology business, who was a exchange student from South Korea that was with me when that meeting took place. And he told me, he said, Jeff, you don't understand what this means to the Korean people. This is literally like a gift from above. And my response to him was, don't doubt it. Don't doubt that it very well may be a gift from above.
Yes, exactly. Amen. I completely concur on that point. Real quick, Greg Klagenberg. What's up, Greg? Good to see you. Clag at Seavine News. Thank you for checking in, Greg. Good to see you. Now, you know, I'm going to circle back here to Peña Nieto. Now, you had said that he's on the run. You know, is it just that the threat of possible prosecution, or has he actually been charged with crimes?
Yeah, so here's another name for your researchers. This is a great thing about, I say this in my threads all the time that I tweet out. I discovered as I made all these great patriot conservative friends, I have this new theory now that I might have been conservative the whole time. I just didn't know it.
There you go.
Get along really well. But not only is everybody really good at memeing, like they make really good internet memes, but they're very good at research. Conservatives are better researchers than we were on the Democrat side. So here's another name for the researchers, and the name is Juan. This is really important. Write this one down. Juan in Spanish is Juan, and the last name is Collado. So Collado. Juan Collado. And the reason why you need to know this name, you wouldn't know this name otherwise. This is a good piece of Jeff Peterson information. Juan Collado is the fixer for the Mexican deep state. So I talk about Dennis Burke being the fixer for Janet Napolitano's Arizona Mafia. Okay, this guy Juan Collado, he's an Argentinian lawyer who has gotten the elite Mexican PRI guys out of all of their worst jams over the years. So like Salinas' brother was charged with murder, and Collado helped him out a lot. There's a guy who's been in the Mexican press for years. Pardon my pronunciation. His last name is Deschamps, Deschamps. He's the president of the Mexican Oil Union, which is a very powerful union. It's a $1 billion union. He's accused of stealing billions of dollars. Juan Collado is his lawyer. He's a lawyer for a lot of the elite top Mexican dark interests, Juan Collado. Anyways, he just got arrested.
Yes.
And this is crazy because he's supposed to be the biggest of all the big shot lawyers in the ritzy part of Mexico City. He was out to lunch with Deschamps, who is the president of the Pemex, Mexican state-owned oil monopoly, who's under investigation for graft and stealing. And apparently the news story is 15 black Suburbans full of federal police showed up while these guys were out to lunch at Morton's Steakhouse in the Polanco neighborhood. It's the ritzy neighborhood of Mexico City. And Juan Collado hit the floor below the table, and Deschamps hit the floor, and he said to him, "They're here to arrest you." And the cops came in and they took away Collado himself, who's the lawyer. And no one was more surprised than Deschamps, who was expecting to be arrested because everybody knows he's dirty, but nobody expected that their lawyer would be arrested. And the reason I'm going on about this name that you may not have heard before, this is very good info. This is the equivalent of, I'll just use the name Rahm Emanuel because he's the highest profile fixer I can think of from Obama land. Who's the Clintons fixer? Let's say I'm thinking like Donna Brazil or someone like that. Someone at the level of a high profile Clinton fixer being arrested and taken away in handcuffs. Collado himself right now is sitting in prison in Mexico City, and he's invoked all of his Mexican legal system tricks to try to get out. They try to get something in Spanish called an amparo, which is a warrant that sort of sets you free no matter what on any charges if you post like $1 million. They've tried the amparo and it was denied by a federal judge, which just blew everybody's mind. The guy can't get out of jail. And so Peña Nieto, the former president, apparently had been removed from Mexico 2 weeks prior by Juan Collado, who happens to be Peña Nieto's lawyer also, because he's a lawyer for all these PRI guys. And so all of them are just on the run at this point, if not literally, figuratively. Peña Nieto comes out and says he's taking an extended vacation to Spain. Yeah, I'll bet it's going to be pretty extended.
Yeah, very extensive. Now, forgive me if I'm mistaken, but was the former governor of Chihuahua that was recently arrested in Italy, was he extradited to the United States?
I don't know where he was extradited to. The news reports were that he was arrested by Interpol, and from there it sort of falls off the grid. There were a bunch of people posting that the Interpol story wasn't true, but then a bunch more people came back and said the Interpol story is true. And the guy apparently either hasn't been seen or the Mexican press is leaning heavily on the story that he has been arrested. I believe when I was getting together some things for this show that I saw that he was being extradited to the United States. So I'll see if I can go through my history and find that, and I'll send it over to you after we're done. But I did find another story here that the mother of a senior aide to Peña Nieto was just arrested herself. What do you know about that? That's right. Yeah, there's a few of them. So I know the story you're talking about. There's another woman too. Aside from her, there was another high-profile PRI person. But the real message is that they're all going down right now.
Right.
So these people that you're seeing charged with crimes, the Mexican people say that they were treated with impunity for years, and they were. And so what's also interesting for your viewers is that as all these people are being arrested during AMLO's, what he calls the 4T, the fourth transformation, and he's divided this history up into sectors. And so you'll hear, if you know a Mexican person, you'll see them talking about the effectiveness of AMLO's 4T. And that means all these anti-corruption initiatives. While they're happening, Lopez Obrador himself, the president, is trucking around Mexico in a very humble car. I think it's like a Volkswagen Jetta.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going on the national media and saying in a very humble way, like, yeah, I don't really know what's going on with all these arrests. Like, I don't have anything to do with it. It's the state-sponsored security apparatus, right? And so,
yes.
like, everybody knows that he has everything to do with it. But the way he's spinning it is in a very humble manner, sort of giving the credit back towards law enforcement while he goes on this national tour of Mexico and eats tacos on the roadside with common people.
Yeah,
so
I absolutely love that.
I described that just so some of the viewers can have some perspective into what's happening in Mexico that you might not otherwise know, because it's clear to many of us that there's strong anti-corruption initiatives happening in Trump's government. But it's pretty interesting to hear that a very similar thing is happening under the administration of Lopez Obrador, and let's just hope that it continues.
Yes, very, very much so. And that's another kind of parallel that I saw between Lopez Obrador and President Trump. You've got, things that seem to be taking place, but President Trump is, kind of just, acting with like a laissez-faire attitude. Like, oh, the DOJ will handle that. That's up to the FBI. But clearly, I think that the only reason that we're seeing these anti-corruption efforts taking place here is, only because President Trump is the one who's in power. If it had been a Democratic president, obviously it would be business as usual, and we would, be continuing to watch our rights be eroded, and people that are working for truth and justice and the rule of law here in America, they would be the ones that would end up behind bars.
Very complicated stuff. I remember, I'm starting to feel like an old man here because I've been around to see some history. I remember being up in Janet Napolitano's office when she was the governor of Arizona. I was on her Arizona Mexico Commission, and she started to back Mr. Obama. She was the first governor. She was the president of the National Governors Association at the time when she started vouching for Obama. And the Clinton people were calling Napolitano's office and they were screaming at her on the phone. They're saying, if you back that senator, you'll never work in politics again. And they're screaming at each other. Those two really, no love is lost between those two, Napolitano and Clinton. And then somehow this crazy administration came to be, the Obama administration. And then we have Fast and Furious and all this Chapo Guzman stuff that ends up with all of his trafficking going up to Chicago. So I don't know how many people realize that, but it's a very strange story that was told in the courtroom in Chapo's trial, how most of the destination for all this trafficking that was happening actually ends up being Chicago. And then you've got the Fast and Furious arms trafficking happening out of Arizona, which was Napolitano's stronghold too. So it really raises questions about the extent of corruption that existed in those governments and the monumental task that Trump has in front of him to sort of undo all of that.
Yeah, it seems to be, something that would be very, very difficult to overcome. But as we said earlier in the broadcast, the amount of progress that we've made so far has just been astounding. When you place President Trump's tenure against any other president in history, the things that we've been able to accomplish in this short amount of time are nothing short of staggering. And that's another reason I like to say, please allow this to play out, everyone. I know that everyone is eager to see justice, but it is a monumental task. I mean, we're not just talking about one agency that has to be overhauled. We're talking about an overhaul of the system itself. Nothing short of, a complete root canal on the American government and, federal and state as well.
And Trump is actually doing the hard work. Like, we're so used to seeing political candidates that come in and just take softball positions on the issues, and they think about what they have to do to get themselves reelected. Let's think about, how about some of the risk that Donald Trump has taken? I mean, politically and otherwise. We just watched the president of the United States literally walk across the border into North Korea himself. And you want to talk about taking on a political risk. There is no way for him to know how that's going to play out. And we're coming up on an election year, but he's more concerned, and it shows in those actions, with making progress than only taking the easy way to protect his election, right?
Yeah.
And a similar sort of scenario is playing out in Mexico. By rejecting NAFTA was a very politically dangerous position to take. NAFTA has been around for years, but they used to tell me on the Mexican side, you know, NAFTA is a sham. It was written by the Mexicans. NAFTA was written by Carlos Salinas' administration. And people on the Mexican side, I don't know if it's true or not, they said they used to use NAFTA to load up semi-trucks with cocaine and drive it into the United States. I don't know if that's true. I hope it's not, but there's a side of me that worries that sort of thing may have been happening over the years, and I think we can find it in the history books. Well, Trump knows this.
Yep.
He understands this. And so no other American president has been willing to come out and just say it how it is. And by the way, on that same topic, something else I started to respect very much about President Trump when I joined Brandon Straka's walkaway campaign and started associating with conservatives is that Trump is not afraid to admit if he's wrong.
Yes.
He just says it how it is. He stands in front of the camera and he says, folks, I just say it how it is. And 90% of the time, he's right. And then there's a few incidents where he shrugs his shoulders and he says, oh, well, we're going to figure out how to fix it.
Yes, that's one of the things that I love about President Trump, and I think that most of the people who voted for him feel that way as well. He's not going to mince words. He's going to get out there and he's going to say exactly what he thinks. And it doesn't matter if he doesn't speak in presidential terms, you know, based on whoever is defining it at that time. President Trump is clearly, he's a man with a mission, and he's interested in doing what's right for America. And, you know, we've got former presidents, former candidates just speaking in broad platitudes, just trying to appeal to the greatest amount of voters that they possibly can. And President Trump is, he's got a very specific voter electorate. And for these people, it's people like you and I who are just, you know, tired of seeing business as usual in Washington, and witnessing, you know, the erosion of America. Now,
that's right.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that Son of a Green Card said, thank you for the super chat. The boss of the CBP man who was arrested in California for selling guns was previously Napolitano's number 2. Did you know about that?
Yeah. Yeah. And the chief of staff of CBP during Obama was the same individual I mentioned, my former best friend, Marco Lopez. He was chief of staff of CBP. And then he went directly to work for Carlos Slim and Carlos Salinas, who he also works for in Mexico. And so a bunch of Napolitano people have been involved in scandals. So when I talk on Twitter about Arizona Mafia, it's Napolitano's group. And that's their name they use for themselves. A bunch of them have been in scandals and continue to be in scandals now. Let me just mention before we, because we're coming up on our time here.
Yes, we are.
To your very intelligent and helpful audience, I really want to thank everyone who is interested in these topics because they're not easy topics, right? You need to do a little bit of study to learn about things that you may have not otherwise considered, like Mexico, like the PRI political party that's different than the Morena political party. But when we do this work, when we do this research, we're getting closer and closer to discovering the truth. That's why we do research, because we're tired of relying on the mainstream media telling us what to believe. We want to prove it to ourselves, and it's important that we demand the proof. About the Democrat Party, I'm going to tell you what their weak point is. Their weak point is they're underfunded, they have no message right now, and they have been bringing in bundles of money through individuals, I believe, okay, and again, it's hard to prove, but it's a theory, through the Mexican PRI. The money goes offshore, it comes back on, you get these huge PACs and other entities that are funded by Mexico, and I'm concerned it's going to continue through 2020. So I want the researchers to consider looking there, because the Mexicans, politicians, they rely on Americans not understanding these things. They hope that you underestimate them. They rely on your memory fading. Okay, these are some of their top items out of their playbook. and they rely on you not understanding news releases that are issued in Spanish. You can understand those by using Google Translate. You read Google News Mexico through Google Translate, and you can get a whole news source for news. I hope that helps you with your research. And for the bashers in the audience tonight, I love you too, guys. Let's all together make America great again.
Yes, wise words. And I didn't see anything but positive comments in the chats tonight. So they must be few and far between if people don't like what you have to say. Jeff, this has been an amazing conversation, my friend. Thank you. Just again, I'm just so elated that you were able to come back on the show, and I want to invite you back anytime there is news on Mexico, or anytime that you see something and you realize how it's linking up to something that you were involved with or that you've gotten information on before.
I'm Real Jeffrey P on Twitter, RealJeffreyP. One word, Real Jeffrey P on Twitter. I'll be wishing you all the best, and hope to see you soon.
All right. And as always, this has been Red Pill 78. I am the Corruption Detector, and this was your Red Pill News for Saturday Night Livestream. Good luck, everyone, and God bless.